Welcome to TradeTheMBI.com. This is John. This report is for the 18th. Well, and it was interesting because as we started the day, we were beginning to see the continuation of the steel fading just a little bit, and so we ended up getting a dramatic DOC spread as the day started and continued. It really showed up intraday pretty clearly. We had that 50K sell that took place prior to that, and rightfully so. And we can see that we're getting the decline in the shakeout readings here. And we had the meeting of the gold and Azure lines that took place. Well, it was back over here as they came together. And that's something we talk about when those tend to meet at peak trend moment. That's usually where you're either got to break up to the upside, create a new run, or it starts to fade just a little bit. So it was easy from that break of the, ABM gold was at 3001. And that puts us where we are right now, which is just in a weak phase. Of course, everything is reset, so it won't take much for a turnaround. We haven't dipped below the red line here, even on the NASDAQ. And it's looking pretty consistent to the S&P. So I think everything's pretty much in line. And we kind of figured that towards you get the middle part of the month that we were going to start to get a play that would take us towards the end of the month, and some of this is just a fill back. So not too dramatic, but pretty much in line. Again, like I was talking about before, people will see that as a nice little double bottom on a higher shakeout reading. It's just you've always had the green above red on the DOC, so it's been in a holding pattern of decent support. So there's obviously money coming into it. It's just there's enough pressure to the downside that's been holding it. But again, the central banks, they can really make alterations on those readings pretty easy when it comes to currencies. And it's been a thing. This is that currency war I've been talking about for a while. From a bond issue, again, still the belief that rates are going to be going lower. There's just a lot of pressure to keep driving them down. Seems to be the theory that we're going to be going back to zero anytime soon. And of course, everyone's still talking about recession. So as long as oil, though, is continuing to have this kind of flux, you're not going to see inflationary pressure. So this is sort of that relief valve that lets you know, hey, oil prices are, which translate to energy costs. And I think that's a big macro view and important to get an idea, because it means that you don't have stranglehold on price action, but it also means that you don't need to factor in the devaluation of money for time, which actually is a negative for the market. Inflation actually means the market usually has got to respond to that. So I think that's going to have a little bit longer term pressure going forward. And of course, like we talked about, gold's been poised to continue its climb as we approach right back up to the highs after just kind of stabilizing for a bit. From a 5K standpoint, so early on we came up, peaked. We'd never had a reset of the, gosh, I'd have to shrink this back even further. And it really points out what I'm talking about with that steel reset. Not happening at all, which means this downturn is still fully intact. So even when we get these deep oversolds, it creates teeny little bounces, but they're not significant. Even this most recent one right here is producing a move back up to the 23, but without steel dipping back below, you can't expect that they're going to have any sustained power, and that's been the continuation. Now, from the breakdown here, we've been in a negative mode. It didn't create a DOC spread or whatever, which is why the DOCON Pink 2 didn't turn red, but it went into that neutral status of pretty much just continuation, and that's what we see with these gray, minor gray in particular, because it's just not coloring. So it depends on what you have your background color set to. So if you have it as green and red, you should change those just so you can see when there's a no print setup. Otherwise, you just get a bunch of different colors. So my base color when the pink doesn't do anything is actually neutral tone. and that just prevents, and you can see that usually because the color of your marker up here will show it. So if you have it as a color, you'll get varied readings from that. So it's important to note when you're looking at this chart. This is a condition I have to set up for the Diacon Paint 2 that will do it. And if you're running the GAN function paint bar underneath, it would show it. I've turned it off in this particular case just to point this out so that that would be something that you would focus on so that you don't have an incorrect, and even if you pick an obscure, strange color, can also be helpful because then you'll know that you're in one of those modes where you don't have a new type signal, it's just a continuation. So I thought I'd mention that one just so that you're aware of it at this particular time, because as I fill in the function for how to deal with these extended periods when we don't have a steel reset, once that language is finalized, it will give us a little bit easier way to see these kind of downturn moves that have this slight pickup, because you can always capture it as we cross to the bullish side with the steel crossing, but you also have to have a corresponding green over red to kind of give you that boost, and that's exactly what it did. It produced it all the way back up to just shy of the 50%, and usually that's when that steel gets above the 13.5, and that usually stays that way until you drop back below the 7.5, which briefly did for a moment there, popped back up, but then once it came back down below it again, that led to continuation of it. We ended up with another one right here as we were approaching the bottom, and that, I mean, for as much as this was the bullish configuration right here, it didn't do a whole lot. I mean, literally to the 23%, yet you've had this massive rise in the DOC red. In fact, shakeout moving to positive here on the current part of the 5K. Expand that up a little bit. Still not producing any significant price move, even though it's showing that there's been a lot of attempt at accumulation. And we're right back to this exact same algo spots, the 2976 right here, having broken the 2988 one. So it just keeps going right back to take care of these previous algo levels that that's where the market has decided the actual real support and return to is, even though they don't really represent solid numbers that most people would go off of. And this is something that's very true about the markets, that you don't know where they've selected their support and resistance. It's not based on the Fibonacci's or anything like that. They have a set mind, and that's what the positive extreme gives us. It starts and lets you know, hey, this is where that activity has occurred, where they've set the marker, at least the market makers, and that's why we get these revisits very specifically back to a lot of these, and sometimes we'll just be right up and down both sides of them as they try to achieve a weighted average right around these key points. So it's worth noting. And certainly if anything new pops up with that, I will let you know, but I just wanted to talk about this color variation. If you don't have both the Paint 2 and the GAN function running, you'll get this neutral kind of reading. So it's important that you have the right colors for your background chart and not the default red and green. As always though, trade well, and I will put up anything new on the Skype chat. Have a good one.